Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the Motivational Millennial podcast. Today we have a real-life wizard with us, Ryan Kane.
Magic.
Yes, he is mind-blowing and introspective and so funny. So we're excited to share the great conversation with you. We have a couple quick announcements before we hop in. First of all, Ivy and I have been doing a lot of speaking and workshops at schools and colleges around the country, including the Entrepreneurial Success Program, which we launched this week, and Ivy will go into much more depth about that next week. So if you are looking for programs for students, whether K through 12 or college, business school, entrepreneurial, we have different programs and we would love to share them with you. So just drop us an email or check out motivationalmillennial.com for more information on that. And very excited to announce that the Creative Courage Summit is officially live. You can check that out at creativecouragesummit.live, L-I-V-E. How remarkable. And this is a really cool summit primarily geared for millennials to help unleash our creative potential, find our purpose, and create the world that we want. I was interviewed on there along with some amazing people like David Allen, famous for his book Getting Things Done, which is one of the best productivity books I've read, and a lot of other awesome millennial creatives and thought leaders. So be sure to check that out. Really grateful to have the opportunity to appear on the summit. And it's a series of videos. It's all free. So go to creativecouragesummit.live. And stick around after our conversation with Ryan for the after show where Ivy and I share our biggest takeaways. Woo-hoo! Now, for my next trick, Ryan Kane. Hello, welcome to the Motivational Millennial podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Blake Brandis.
And I'm Ivy LeClaire.
Our Motivational Millennial guest today is Ryan Kane. Ryan is a full-time magician and comedian thriving in San Francisco. When he's not performing for companies like Louis Vuitton, Wells Fargo, and Google, he's headlining his own monthly show in San Francisco for theater goers and helpless San Francisco tourists. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We, for our audience's benefit, we were some of those helpless San Francisco tourists who were wandering Fisherman's Wharf and happened to come along Ryan's show. And it was so remarkable to see you doing not only your magic, which is impressive, but also your comedy. And would you mind sharing a little bit more with our audience what you're up to now and what you love about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Recently, I've been doing more theater shows, moving indoors, renting out theaters and producing my own shows and trying to get butts into seats for that. So I just added a show in Berkeley. I have a show in San Francisco every month now. I do shows in Sacramento and Martinez and all over the place. So that's kind of where my passion is right now, because that's kind of what I got into this of like, oh, I want to be a magician. You sell tickets, you do a show. And I'm doing that right now, which is really fun.
What is that experience like doing the theater production versus doing the outdoor passersby style show?
It's funny. So my background is I started street performing when I was like 14, 15. And when I say street magic, people will think it's like David Blaine things. It's not. It's like I had a table, I do a show, I gather a crowd, and then I pass a hat at the end and make money. So it's like a very structured thing, but there's low production value and it's all about harassing the audience and getting people in. And when you do theaters, you don't need to do that. When you do corporate, you don't need to do that either. And so I had that in my blood for a long time, and I've actively tried to get it out where I'm not as street style as I used to be. So that's probably the biggest thing, just from differences of doing shows indoors and outdoors. Is outdoors, I'm a little bit more aggressive because I have to be to get people to watch. If you bought a ticket for my show, you're invested in me being good. If you're just eating their, a hot dog with your kids passing by, that's a whole other story. So that's like the other thing. And then also just, I'm really obsessed with when you see me in the theater, it not feeling like, oh, he's just doing his act. Like I want it to feel special. I print programs. I try to add as much production value in as the venue provides. Sometimes that's a full light plot. There's always full sound. I've invented a fly system so I can lower things from the ceiling. And stuff. So yeah, it's things like that. I have a background in I did so much musical theater and stuff in high school that, I understand what a theater show is and I understand what I'm competing against. When people go out to see a show, it's like, yeah, I should be just as good as seeing a community production of Music Man because they charge just as much as me. So,
well, congratulations for taking on that next level, because it is a new level of commitment, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what drew you to magic in the first place?
I got a magic set when I was 6. It's really hard not to dive into like my script for this.
That's okay.
I'm a very different character on stage than what I am when I'm off, and I try to keep them very separate. It's like right now I'm just talking to Ryan Kane, the person, not Ryan Kane, the magician. Yeah, so I got a magic set when I was 6, and the kind of full story is it came in like a can, and inside were like all the little tricks, and inside of each of the little bags with the trick in it was also the little piece of paper that told you how to do the trick. And I opened all of them. And it was like an outdoor party, and most of them flew away, the instructions. So I had to figure out how all the little tricks worked. And that was kind of my introduction to magic. And then when I turned 10, I, muddled around magic a little bit. My parents got me like a really good magic book. And that really started it, where I started learning more advanced sleight of hand and deeper principles beyond just little toy. That was the other step of, oh, this is a budding interest. He can be good at this. And then, like I said, when I got into somewhere in middle school, I got this DVD called Street Theater, which was produced by, I forget the guy's name. And it was just a documentary about all these street performers at these giant festivals. And I would just watch these guys, and they'd be surrounded by like thousands of people, most of them jugglers. And I was, they were the funniest things. And, it's a documentary, so they've cherry picked like the best moments in the shows. And I've seen these guys since, and some of them are that good and some of them are like, eh. But at the time I was like, wow, this is like a superhero. I want to do that. And I grew up in Oak Grove, which is a suburb of Sacramento, California. And Sacramento has Old Sacramento, which is like its touristy area. And they had a street performing program, but they had no shows. They had like 2 balloon guys and like some musicians. So I went in there and got approved and started doing shows, magic shows out there. And I was the only game in town because there was no one else. So it was this great thing. And most magicians have to like do kid shows or do a lot of, free shows to kind of get those first couple hundred performances in. And I was very lucky that I could do what I wanted to do, which is perform for general public, perform for mixes of adults and audience members, right from the get-go.
So what did you learn from engaging with the general public? Because that's a very hard skill just personally. I'm sure you're constantly, as you mentioned earlier, trying to capture people's attention, but also dealing with rejection, dealing with hecklers. How do you develop that inner fortitude to stand up time and time again in public and perform?
Right. Yeah. Well, especially I was like, I was in high school. So talk about being like caring a lot about your ego and being very kind of nervous and stuff with things. And my dad has this great story because I'm very introverted. My girlfriend's like, you are an introvert who can act extroverted very, very well. And so I was always very, very, into my room doing my own thing. And then the first time my parents came out and saw me street perform, my dad was like, who is this guy? He's not my son. Because I'm like, how can I tell people to stop and stuff. And a lot of it was just doing it. I knew that this was going to be hard. I knew it was out of my comfort zone. But the great thing about, again, street shows, which I don't do that many of anymore, but at the time, it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, if the show's bad or if I get heckled, like, they're just going to walk out and never remember me. And I can just start anew in 2 seconds. It becomes harder when you actually get paid to do something. And then it's like, wow, I have one shot to make this really good. Whereas a street show, it's like, it's whatever. And, listening to the audience, there's some really cool stories of, especially out there, you meet interesting people on the street. You meet people that don't have anything to give at the end of the show, but they want to. So that you get weird things. Like I got like this little cowboy pin that somebody gave me. A lot of kids will give you candy because it's the only thing they have to give. And they feel like, no, I need to give you something. Oh. And then you get like, religious missionaries, like they have like $1 million bills that have like, religious paraphernalia written on it. Drop those in their hats and stuff. And it's like, and you get receipts and all sorts of things. A big thing about a street show is it's kind of mind control in a way. Like you're taking people in, you're stopping them, you're making them feel very, very comfortable. And then you suddenly make them very uncomfortable by asking for money. And the only way for them to relieve that is to put money in the hat, or at least feign that they're putting money in the hat for themselves. Wow. Social pressure. And this is a very old style of performing. And, there's guys who do this full time, that's, fantastic acts who all they do is street perform all over the world. And a big part of what they do, and not so much me, is, they want to make sure that they can be seen by the people. And they You don't want to work with clients and stuff and have to deal with the paperwork of being a professional performer. They are professional performers. They're just professional street performers.
How do you feel your identity has shifted going from that street performing world into the corporate, the theater show? Because it seems like almost I guess it is a business shift from the literal sense of business and the transaction, but also you as a business versus, I guess, more you as a freelancer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a private contractor for almost everything I've ever been booked for. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain polish. You don't need to be as aggressive. Although what's great is because I'm used to and I understand how hard it is to get people to watch someone. And when, like in a street show, you actually don't want that big of applause breaks because people will leave. You know, like as soon as you get applause, people were like, oh, that's good. And they'll walk away when you need to keep them at the end of the show because that's when you make your money. So when I do corporate shows, my show flows very, very quickly and very effortlessly. So once it starts, it's just over before people know. And it's been like, wow, that was 40 minutes. And that's an edge that I have over other performers who are a little bit slower. And again, going back to what I talked about earlier, I've taken out a lot of the aggressive things. So like going out to make like there's a bit of my street show where like there's a guy who doesn't clap, has his arms crossed, and then like this kid does something amazing, and I just walk out into the audience, usually in the back row, and I pick the biggest, meanest looking guy I can who's not clapping, and I unfold his arms and make him clap. It's hilarious, you know, and it's really good. You know, it's something I came up with a long time ago, and I have several very close magician friends who don't do street and they only do corporate. And he hates that part. He was like, dude, you don't need that. He hates it. So my kind of deal with him is like, okay, I use it outdoors and I use it in situations where I need it. But if I'm in a theater, if I'm at a corporate show, I don't do that because that's too aggressive.
Right. Right. You've got like the executive vice president of sales and you're like strong arming him to make him clap.
Yeah. That's kind of the major difference of the show. Pretty much stays the same, but certain lines, certain beats will not make it into a corporate show that I would put into if I'm at the pier. And again, I use the pier now just entirely for new material or to keep things fresh. Usually whenever time I'm out there, there's something new in the show that I'm doing. And that's the whole reason I'm out there.
So what is your absolute favorite part about being a magician?
Jeez. I mean, a big part is I'm my own boss. I'll kind of go sideways here of like, my show's very funny and people often ask like, oh, would you ever do just straight comedy or anything? The cool thing about magic and the medium of a magician is all you have to do is fool people and all you have to do is tricks. And that's a fairly low bar to clear. So it allows me to be funny and it allows me to be poignant if I wish, or be, you know, beautiful or be really amazing. And you don't get that as much in the street show because again, it's just watch me. But, you know, if I did the bullet catch, then, you know, it gets kind of dramatic at the end. And in my theater show, especially, there was a piece where I would have a kid and he would help out and I'd give him a balloon or I'd feign to give him a balloon. And then I just rip off the string of the balloon and give it to him. And then I make him guess the magic word. And I just keep giving him ripping the balloon string up because he would get it wrong every time. And then at the end, I would talk to him and there was like this cool poignant moment. And then there was this really great magic moment where the string restored itself. And that's what I love about magic is I can take this very basic plot and go all over the place with it. Whereas if I was a comedian, everything has to end in a punchline. Everything has to. The medium has to be a joke. And anytime I'm spent not doing a joke, I'm kind of wasting the audience's time. So that's my favorite thing about being a magician is it allows me to do whatever I want because all I have to do is make sure that I'm doing a trick. And that's very easy because that's what I want to do.
That is such an interesting perspective and one that I would not have thought of. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What is the biggest dream that you've achieved so far? And in what ways did you have to grow to achieve that? Because
my show is very funny. Whenever I have like deep artistic things I need to get out that don't fit in the show, I write poetry. And in high school, I wrote a poem that was all about like telling my mother, look, you've got to stop bailing me out. Like, you've got to make sure that I can just survive off of these card tricks. You know, you've got to let me fail and see. And it had this clause about like, I want like my own place and, you know, my not to be in debt and like, to be able to do magic full time. And it's like a couple of years ago, I realized that I'd achieved that, which is kind of cool. And so now it's like moving on to the next thing. I mean, there's not very many people, even some of my best magician friends in the area have day jobs or they do other things. And it's like, no, I just do this. I bartended for a year and a half. That's the only non-magic income I've ever had in my life. And I'm 27 now.
How have you been able to pull that off? I mean, you don't have to go super deep into your like financial side, but
the street helps, right? Because especially, and again, I don't do it as much now because I'm really trying to force myself not to. But, I could always go out and do more shows, street performing, because that's always an avenue there, right? As long as it's not raining and stuff. I'm also very good at kind of flexing my lifestyle depending upon, I don't know when my next big paycheck's coming. So I'm pretty good at being like, okay, yeah, I can't afford this right now. Or, oh no, I'm doing all right. I can do this. And so just making sure that I live within my means so I never get too out of hand is important. I'm also not motivated by money. Like I just want to do good magic and be able to have the lifestyle that I want, but I'm not trying to get rich. It's never been the goal.
In terms of success, one of the definitions I've always loved is, are you doing the thing you want to be doing on most days? And it sounds like you definitely are, which is amazing.
Well, I mean, there's different things like, what am I doing this morning? I'm going through Google alerts and sending out cold call emails. So there's that aspect of my,
Yeah.
I mean, I get to use magic tricks as tax write-offs. That's pretty cool.
That's a great tagline.
The IRS will come after me probably.
That's right. Sorry, that'll be your unofficial tagline. Yeah, that's right. This show is not tax deductible, friends. You still have to pay for it.
Yeah, there you go.
Cannot write this off on your taxes.
There's this great bit that a magician does, this guy in like Denmark or something, where he talks about, oh yeah, anything I use in my show I can use as a tax write-off. So he brings out a bunch of parking tickets and has someone pick a parking ticket, and then he has like gold fountain pen that's like the magic thing, and then he has like this gold washing, and he has like all these like crazy things that have no business being in a magic show that he uses as like magic wands to just, that's the gag.
That's really funny. Which of your accomplishments would you say has surprised you the most?
Accomplishments are always like slow and steady. It's not like I'm like, oh, I played Vegas. That was pretty cool. That was like a corporate gig, right? I got called out by Microsoft to perform at CES, which is like the biggest trade show in Vegas. And it was the last year that Microsoft was there. So I never got rebooked because they never went there again. That was cool. I mean, it's still like, of the accomplishments I think back, I'm like, wow, I actually put that together. It's kind of at the end, my senior year of high school, I approached my theater teacher and was like, hey, I want to do a show. And I wanted it to be big. And she let me. And I used all my street performing money to build illusions. Like I sawed myself in half. I did all these things. Like there were like 4 like legit illusion things that I built myself, that I paid for myself, that I did myself. And I've only done once. I've only done that show once. And the whole show had this whole thing about like graduation. I was a senior. My brother was a freshman. And so there's this whole thing of like leaving a legacy behind. I talk about Houdini, who left a legacy behind, and that's why you know who he is, even though he wasn't that famous at the time. I mean, he was, but like there were other magicians who people knew, but he invested all of his stuff in the legacy. And all this thing, and at the end, like I transformed into my brother because like, So it's just like looking back at that, I just recently watched this like over Christmas because my parents are moving, and so they pulled it out like the old DVD and stuff.
Sure.
Like, wow. I mean, I did that when I was like 17. That was pretty good. And I did all the lights. I did all the sound design. I did everything for that show.
Wow. It was really deep.
I look back now and I'm like, wow, this is way too melodramatic. There's so many things I would not do anymore. But there's a lot of things that I was like, wow, but I did do it. I did a street performing section, and I had my brother play, because he plays guitar. And so he sat to the side and played like something on guitar. And I monologued about street performing, and at the end, like dropped $5 in his hat and like walked off and stuff. It's like, oh, that was like a cool moment that I came up with when I was like 17.
Yeah, that's high concept art for high school. That's really impressive.
It is.
Didn't make any money.
But you made yourself proud. That's the key.
Would you share a story about the most significant challenge you've faced so far and what it was like for you to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, the biggest thing. So I grew up white, upper middle class, suburban America. Like I have extremely supportive parents and everything. And my whole life was like, yeah, you go, you do good grades, you go to college. Like that's what happens. And I discovered magic halfway through there, but I was also doing a ton of theater in high school. Like magic was kind of on the side. When I went to college, and that's when I moved to the Bay Area, was for college, I told myself, okay, I'm going to give magic its shot, because I was constantly in theater in high school. So I turned down a lot of gigs because I had rehearsal. If you've ever dated anybody or known anybody who does theater, it's like, I have rehearsal. That's the story. So when I moved out here, I said, okay, no theater shows for 2 years. And I'm going to take as many gigs as I can while doing college, while being in a fraternity and partying. And then that became 3 years. And then I pretty much went to my parents. I was like, look, I think this is it. I don't think I need the college, which is big. That's putting all your eggs in one basket and really going against, especially the norms, especially millennials, right? Because that's what we were raised to do. And say, no, the world has changed, especially like I went to study theater and marketing, two things which are skill based. You don't really need a degree for those. That's always been my outlook of like, I want to develop skills. I don't care about a piece of paper that says I can do this. I just want to be able to walk in a room and do it. So magic, I can teach myself everything I learned. And I've taught myself a lot in marketing, but none of it came from those college classrooms. I felt like they were so stuck in the past, hadn't adapted for anything that was going on, social media, nothing. And I was just like, we're wasting our money doing this. I'm going to do a piece of paper that's never going to happen. I'm never going to use it. I'm not going to be able to charge more because I have a bachelor's degree. And that was a really tough thing to tell my parents, who'd given me everything and saying thanks, but no thanks on this kind of thing that they had definitely dreamed. My mother would still love if I had a degree. If I was going to go back, it'd be mostly for her, and it's in the whole scheme of things is not a big challenge. But for me, it was, to tell your parents would be like, look, I'm not going back to school. I'm going to do magic tricks. It was an uncomfortable dinner. And then the next day they were fully behind me.
Wow.
Yeah, but it does take a lot of courage, though. I
Absolutely.
think anytime you're resisting the dominant narrative that you've grown up with, which you certainly did, it sounds like both culturally and within the family. And it's awesome that the result was your parents ended up still being supportive. But I think not knowing how that's going to turn out, both for your family and also for yourself. I mean, you obviously had the confidence to do it, which was amazing, but it still takes a lot of courage to be willing to say, I'm going to go this non-traditional route and put everything I am and my whole future in this particular passion. And I love the distinction you made between skills and degrees, right? I'm wondering, is there something you've done on the marketing side that was really clever or creative or weird, but like worked more than you thought it would?
What's funny? This is going to sound like I'm being the total hypocrite, but if I do anything effectively marketing, it's because I do things super old school. like I'm really good at direct mail, which is a weird thing. But again, that's something I never learned in college. Like that was going out to other guys that said, hey, yeah, if you want to book shows, write a sales letter and get a list and send it out to people. And that I'm going to do that today. I'm writing another ad campaign thing today. And so it's like doing things like that. I've just been like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. There's other podcasts that I want to talk about marketing. It's like, that's not really my main passion. I can do just enough to make by. And today, most of my stuff works on word of mouth. I have a lot of friends. So it's like, oh, I can't do this gig. Ryan can do it. And then we'll pass things back and forth that way. So, that's the best marketing you can get.
Yeah, which I think speaks to your talent as well. Because if people are saying, wow, I saw this really amazing magician and he was also really funny, then, they book you. That's so cool. You've already shared some really cool thoughts with us so far, and I'm wondering if there's other advice you would give to millennials who are on their journey toward fulfillment and success.
My brethren, who I feel like I can really talk to, are the other guys in like the arts, the other girls in the arts as well. There's this whole thing about you need a backup plan for if you're going to become a singer or an artist or a writer. And the reason they want that is because those jobs are hard to do. The going is going to get rough. There's no hierarchy of how to do that. And I would say, yeah, but don't take the backup plan, because then as soon as the going gets rough, which it will, you're going to abandon it and take the backup plan. So just go all in and do it while you're young, because I did this when I was like 20. I dropped out of college and did this stuff, right? There was all sorts of time, if I really crashed and burned, for me to go back and find something else. So if you're on that plunge, if you're on that edge, and you can, if it doesn't really matter, it's different, right? Like now I have a cat that depends on me. So I joke about that. All my friends that have kids, I'm like, but when you're younger, if it's just you and maybe your girlfriend or whatever, like just go do it, try it. I'm a big believer in that. I really think it's a good decision, the best decision I've ever made.
Are there ever moments when you did have those doubts, and what did you tell yourself to keep going when it was like, oh man, either like rent's looking really tight this month or the gigs just no one's responding? What do you do in those moments to keep going?
I do two things. And I try, there's one that's better, is I go watch other guys. And I say guys because most magicians are guys, but I watch videos of other people. And they're either people that I know that I'm better at that suck, so I can feel great about myself. That works, but it's not as good as finding guys that really inspire me and be like, wow, yeah, I can do that. and I'll binge, the shows, clips of guys that I'm really inspired by and stuff. And that usually kind of resets me and re-inspires me and says, no, I'd rather be doing this. And also, like, a lot of companies will hire me to perform in their offices, at like 5 o'clock, and I'll walk by and people will still be in their cubicles. And I'm just like, yeah, I made the right decision. I just can't even imagine it.
So you made this decision, like you are encouraging people to do, to kind of take the leap and follow your passion and your art. How do you feel that your life is more fulfilling than it would have been if you hadn't done so?
Again, because I'm actually doing what I want to be doing. I know a lot of people who, fathers who have had jobs that I don't think they've ever really liked, but they've done it, and they go do it. And I think that's completely respectable to actually have the dream job, really, and go out and be my own boss, which is huge too. I don't necessarily play well with others. And so to have my own thing and be able to lead my life and move where I want to and travel and have the complete flexibility to do and be where I need to be or where I want to be is like, what is the cost? Well, if I had a degree and I was a marketing exec for Twitter, I mean, I'd make more money, even if I was anything else, like that's fine. But again, I'm living exactly how I want to live. I'm happy. So,
yeah, I'm hearing for you a stronger value around freedom and art and creativity. And you even mentioned, over money. So like you're really honoring your values through this.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where, again, I was street performing when I was 14 and I, like my first hat was like $80. So I had tons of money in high school. And even when in, college, and college kids are broke. I have friends that are like, oh, we'll get all the college market to come. The college kids don't have any money. They're not going to go see your show unless it's free. But, I had money, so I would be the one buying things. And then as my friends got degrees and stuff, suddenly I am no longer the rich friend. I am an equal friend, or I am not. And I hate being a moocher. I don't like taking anything from anybody. And again, it comes back to like, I used to beg my parents to make me, when I went to college, my parents were paying rent. And I was like, no, next year I pay half my rent. Next year I pay my car insurance. Next year I do this, because I was so big in like getting my independence. I took driver's ed in summer school because otherwise I couldn't guarantee that I would have my driver's license right when I turned 16, because I could get it as late as 17. And I hated asking my parents to drive me around. I need independence and I need that feeling. So I'm weird in that way.
Well, I think that's a great model for millennials to develop more independence, because so often we hear all these critiques of millennials about the entitlement and everything. And I think what you did is really admirable in the sense you said, it's important for me to take these risks, to have the opportunity to fail, because it does build the resilience that you have used to continue your career. So I just want to give you props for that, man.
I obviously know, like, I have a safety net. Like, if I crash, burn, I have parents that can help me out and get me back on my feet. I broke my leg a couple years ago and they were there to help out. So that's there. And I'm very fortunate for that. Millennials, probably most millennials, do not have that. And I'm aware of that. But I still think that unless you have some sort of risk to your own, whether it just be pride, I think that's important if you're going to do anything.
Would you share a book or a quote that changed the direction of your life?
Yeah, and I was thinking a lot about this because there's lots of quotes that I like. And I was like, what's a good, like, magic-oriented stuff? So if you want a really inspiring book and learn a little bit about magic and have a really great read, there's a book called Hiding the Elephant by Jim Steinmeier. It's a history of, the main plot is how Houdini made an elephant disappear, but it talks about all these other magicians. And that's another thing that I turn to inspire me, of just like reading, especially Jim Steinmeier, who's like the fantastic writer. If you've seen the movie The Prestige, Michael Caine's character, the guy who invents magic tricks but doesn't actually perform them, Jim Steinmeier is the real life that character. He's the guy who invented out how to, if you've seen like an illusion show, he invented everything you saw. He invented how to do all these things. And he's also a great writer. And that book's just fantastic. And it's just filled with quotes, like the famous one of magicians guard an empty safe, that, the secrets that we're so protective of are just, they're completely useless and they don't mean anything. It's true, it's fine. So yeah, I think that's an inspiring read just for a lot of, a very interesting cast of characters doing their things. You learn about Houdini, you learn about Thurston, Chung-Ling Soo, all these different guys like Houdini, right? Who broke for most of his life, but still went out there and did things. And the story of him and his wife and how they dealt with the struggles and, having theaters burned down with equipment in it, or things lost or beaten up and stuff. They're just really cool stories that I love.
Thank you for the recommendation. Based on your experience, what unique challenges do you feel that members of the millennial generation face?
That's a tough one. We have been put into a box, which I hate labels. When I was in high school, I never wore anything with a label. Like I wouldn't wear like any brand names because I figured that they just like classified you as things. You know, the fact that you're a millennial, people come into you with different special snowflake, all that type of BS. And I think overcoming that is going to be hard, but everyone's overcome. You know, the baby boomers had to deal with this and the golden generation had to deal with this and all this stuff going forward. As far as education goes, I think the fact that a lot of the ideas here, the world that we're living in, have changed since what maybe some of the executives understand. You know, the fact that social media is a thing that you actually have to think about and deal with, going against the norms. But I don't know if that's unique against just millennials or just always like, oh, the older generation doesn't know anything what they're doing. You know, but there's some things that we're right about and there's some things that I think we're wrong about.
I did want to follow up with something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned that most magicians tend to be men. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of theory about why that is, or in your experience, if you've seen certain things that...
Yeah, well, so this is going to get, very stereotypical very quickly. Obviously there are people that go out, there are people that fit outside this box. And I have a thing half written talking about how I want more women magicians. Like, we need more. I want to do a whole thing where I borrow a kid and like a little girl and do some trick with them, talking with this like very feminist style thing. But the leading reason why is because magic is kind of a very introverted thing. To be good at it, you have to go do this and sit in your room and practice and practice and practice and practice. And generally, little girls are more social, or at least raised to be more social than little boys. Magic also has this innate power thing to it of like, look, I have power. And that appeals more to boys, you know, guys trying to show who they are. And also, like, most of the magic heroes are men. All magic books assume the gender to be man. Except for Jim Steinmeier. He has one trick where he uses a woman and people were like confused. His readers wrote in and were like, why is the assistant doing the trick? And it's like, no, the magician could be a girl.
Oh my God.
So it's like, it's definitely a boys club. But if you are a woman interested in learning magic, you will be welcomed. It's not like we need more people. Because so many women that are doing magic, it's really hard to get past just that aspect of, look, I'm a woman, I'm doing magic, and that's my thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine, and that's effective. But there's so much more that you could do. Like, I'd love to see a woman who goes on stage, and that's not the thing because, oh yeah, she's just a woman magician, and people accept that. So I want more. Jade is a fantastic woman magician. There's Kristen Lampert, several more. But, you know, Heather Rogers in the Bay Area, things like that. There's just not that many, and I want more. And I think we'll see that, you know, because people are challenging gender stereotypes at such a younger age and things. And I think millennials, especially as we start raising our own kids, will be much more open to being like, oh, you want to learn magic? Cool, learn magic. That's that. Yeah, there's no aptitude. There's no reason why women can't do it. It's just that the hardest thing is because most magic tricks are designed for like men's clothing. You know, a lot of...
Oh, interesting.
Like, that's the big thing of like doing magic in a dress is hard. It just requires stuff to overcome, but it's great. People have done it and it's great. It's almost better, right? Like, a magician walks out. I just watched this clip of this guy who performs with no sleeves. And it's just like, it's just better because you know that he's not using his sleeves.
That's intriguing. And one last question as we go this technical route with this, but I'm wondering about the role of the assistant. Could you talk a little bit about how you see the role of the assistant from a theatrical perspective or a relational perspective than just maybe the technical part?
Well, I've never used assistants. That show that I made in high school, I had people that were assistants, but they were essentially stage hands. You know, they bring the stage on, they bring them off and stuff. You know, the stereotypical one, you know, beautiful girl, misdirection and stuff. You know, I do a solo show, so I don't really use that as much. I will say that I've ran away from that cliche as much as possible. When I had stage hands or assistants in my theater show, they were always men, because I didn't want to play up that idea of the beautiful woman assistant. I run away from a lot of things, but usually the first audience members I use are guys because I don't want it to be, oh, look, he's using magic to hit on women. I run away from a lot of cliches like that. I'm very, very conscious of that. So I can talk about like using audience members as assistants because I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always see I'm casting a show. So I'm obviously looking for certain things. Someone who's smiling, someone who fits kind of the general thing of what I want for that piece. You know, like I do a trick with a paintball gun and I do a bullet catch, and I usually want them to be close to my age and excited about the trick, they volunteer. So I'll pick that. Usually a woman, mostly because I've used to keep the balance of having usually one man on stage earlier. So I'll have that just to balance it out and stuff. I'm really big on not embarrassing people as much as possible. There's no insults in my show. There's some jokes, but never, I'm not ever making people put silly hats on or dance.
That was something I really appreciated about your show, actually, was it was very respectful while not being afraid to be silly, which I think is a hard line to toe. And something that we try to do in our motivational assemblies too, that it's always empowering and affirming. And especially I'd imagine with that balance of magic and comedy, because there is sort of the misdirection and the trickster aspect, I really appreciate the choices that you make to affirm and uplift your audience. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it's like the threat is there. I love the threat of, oh, I can embarrass the hell out of you, but I never do. Like, that's where the fun comes in. Saying there will be audience participation in the show, most of it involuntary. You, sir, rise, is aggressive and is like, oh, what's about to happen? And then I end up bringing, 6 people on stage, and I joke about, oh, don't worry, only one of you has to take off all their clothes and stuff. But at the end, I treat them fairly nice. Like, I don't make them do anything silly, and then I send them back. And that's important. That's another thing of like why that first trick uses so many people is if you're the first audience member on stage, that's a lot of pressure. You are defining the precedent for how the magician interacts or how an audience member interacts with the magician. But if I bring 6 people on stage, that responsibility is divided upon a group. So nobody has to feel that burden. And so it's easier for you as an audience member, if you're involved in that trick, to help out. And also the fact that, oh, he's already used a bunch of people. Nobody was made to look foolish. It's safe to volunteer. I asked for 2 volunteers my entire show ever. It's for a kid because kids will always volunteer, and it's for the shooter to shoot me with the bullet catch because normally people will want to do that. But even then, I have to. It's about a coin flip. About sometimes people never volunteer, and I have to pick someone myself.
Well, that's a very empathetic perspective for you to hold, for sure.
It's just listening, like listening to the audience, listening to what people tell you, and it is so important, right? Like I've watched a lot of magic shows. If you ever want to know what people think about after a show, go to the bathroom and listen to people talking.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for the immense range of advice that you gave, even just now about going to the bathroom after the performance. That's a good piece of information.
Honestly just talking, oh, that was terrible, and then they'll come out. That was fantastic. Great job.
That's so interesting. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, would you share with the audience where they can find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Kane Magic, whether that's ryankanemagic.com or Ryan Kane Magic on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And that's Kane spelled with a K, like Citizen Kane. So yeah, you can find out about my shows. And again, I have a show in San Francisco once a month. I have shows usually all over the Bay Area. And if you go there, you will be able to see where the next ones are and buy tickets.
Well, and Blake and I can attest firsthand that it's an awesome show. And we just saw the street one, so we need to go see one of your theater ones. That would be so awesome. Yeah, go. Everybody go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello again. Welcome to our after show of our conversation with Ryan Kane, the man, the myth, the magician. I really appreciated the distinction that Ryan was making between things that you need skills to accomplish and things that you need degrees to do well. And I think this is really important in the broader conversation about when we are ready to do things, because there are certain things, obviously, that we need that long trajectory, whether it's a doctor or there's a broad or very specific body of knowledge that takes a long time to learn. But so often I think I'm certainly guilty of saying, oh, I just need to do a few more speaking events before I'm really ready to be a speaker, or I just need to go to a few more courses before I'm really ready to be able to market something, or any of these things that we tell ourselves that we just need a few more X before we're ready to Y. Have you found that in your experience, Ivy, as well?
Yeah, I definitely have, and I think that I usually am telling myself that getting a degree or having a specific title or piece of paper or something makes me more credible. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really interesting that it seems like he's talking about gaining credibility through practicing his art. Mm-hmm. that is more valuable to him than the credibility of an MFA or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's also a really interesting distinction.
Yeah, because credibility often is about, can we trust you to do a good job? Mm-hmm. And there are different ways to demonstrate that, as you're saying. Sometimes it's like, yes, you can trust me because I studied it for 5 years. But more often with anything that is artistic or performative, and I mean that really broadly, you could argue that even like plumbing or something is performative in that sense. Okay, I don't need to super qualify everything I just said. I was going to say, which is not to degrade plumbing, but I don't think anyone. I think everyone's very thankful for plumbing.
You just said plumbing was performative. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. That's very laudatory, actually. Oh, yes, you're a plumber? How performative of you. Let's go unclog some things. Anyway.
Magical.
You brought it back.
Oh, I just use that word a lot.
I know, you didn't even mean to. I could tell it in your face. Like, you're unironically using the word magical right now. But hey, it did the trick. Anyway. You're welcome. Okay. You're welcome. All that to say, often the successful performance of an act is credibility building. And I think you and I have seen that in our respective areas. So when you are coaching and helping people make personal transformative breakthroughs, and then they say to their friends, hey, Ivy helped me make this really transformational breakthrough. And then their friends say, great, Ivy, I want to talk to you about making transformational breakthroughs in my own life. Or, if I'm speaking at a school or at an event and they say, wow, this is really impactful for our students. And obviously this is testimonials. I'm not saying anything brilliant, or inventive on the marketing front, but I think it speaks to your point about building credibility through the practice and performance of the skill.
Well, I think because the reality is that it doesn't matter how much you've studied the subject until you've actually gone and done the work of the profession.
Yeah.
Because I can think of psychologists going and they're studying a lot and they're learning a lot, anything, but this is just the first thing that popped into my mind is that you can't know really what it's like to be a psychologist until you have to get clients, build rapport with them, have really intense conversations that you can't even possibly imagine really, And so it's like, I was talking to one of my best friends the other day and she has 2 children and it's like, she was talking to me about how every mom that she knows kind of experiences becoming a mom differently. Mm-hmm. Like some people, it's very easeful immediately, becoming a mom the first time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because there's no amount of reading about being a mom that's like going to prepare you for the emotional experience of what that is and having this human be totally dependent on you and your identity shift that happens, right? So I think that's a really important thing to remember when we're going out and doing our work, because if we take enough seminars or read enough books or get enough degrees that we will be perfect at what we do when we start it, we will be knowledgeable, we will have a foundation that we can build on, but it's going to take the actual practical experience of building the skills to make you successful.
Yeah, and like so many things, it's not either or, right? A good professional does both.
Yeah.
You do your research, you do your practice, but I think our real point we're trying to drive home is don't let the need to do your research get in the way of you starting to practice at whatever level is practical for you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else did you enjoy from the conversation with Ryan?
Well, I think one of the themes that really stood out to me was this whole idea around trusting yourself. It came up when he was talking about leaving college to go and pursue this dream and this passion. This is a theme that we've heard about before on the show, but that combined with him wanting to take on new challenges, where he was telling his folks to please stop, helping me so much. I really want to be able to do this myself. That's also a level of trusting yourself. Like he was believing not only that this was the right path for him, but also that he was capable of pursuing it. And it strikes me right now because this is one of the major themes that I'm working on in my own life, is trusting myself on so many levels. I mean, I can't even do a list of it because it's just extensive. But I think that if we all really stop to notice how much we defer to other people, meaning, you know, we have a decision and it's like, should I wear this skirt? Should I wear the blue one or the black one? You know, and it's like, it's a very small thing, but you're asking someone, should I do this or should I do that? What are your thoughts on this? I think it can, at least for me, I'm noticing it's creating a habit or has created a habit where I feel like I need my decisions validated by other people, or I feel like I need my ideas validated by other people before I can execute them. And I was speaking to an amazing spiritual teacher. She gave me some really cool advice, I thought. Her name is Melanie Dewberry, and she was so awesome. I was talking to her about what it was like for her to follow this path of choosing spirituality as like the main focus of her work. And she was just so adamant about trusting yourself. She didn't even know that I had been contemplating this, but it was just such synchronicity because she was talking about how important it is to trust yourself. So if you have a really great idea, or this is what she was saying to me, if you have a really great idea and you want to run with it, like, don't spend all your time listening to all these marketing gurus and whatever. If a certain type of marketing is really uncomfortable to you or doesn't resonate with you, then don't do it. Don't just do it because other people are telling you to do it. And the thing that really struck me about what she said was that you're gonna make mistakes. You know, it's like with the whole degree thing or the research thing, we're like trying to prevent ourselves from making a mistake. So we're asking everybody else their opinion because we don't trust ourselves, because we think that somehow we're not gonna make mistakes if we have somebody else's opinion. But she said, no matter what you do, even if you just listen to yourself and trust yourself, you're going to make mistakes, and that's going to happen, but at least you're making mistakes out of integrity. And that sentence, I wrote that down in my notes. I was like, make mistakes out of integrity. And it just made me feel so emboldened, so excited. I mean, and that's exactly what Ryan was talking about. I mean, you know, in a way, he's talking about, shoot, if it ends up being a mistake, then at least he was really trusting himself, and the mistake was made out of integrity, essentially.
Yeah, and I think there's an important distinction, too, about getting input from people as a source of information to better inform a decision by maybe having ideas we haven't thought of, versus, like you're saying, us trying not to be wrong. And so I think it's really important to look at where that comes from. And so often, companies do this too, right? If they're going to produce a product, they want to make sure that people are going to like it. But the problem with doing something like focus groups, for example, is that they are so prone to cognitive biases. Groupthink, for example, where one person has a strong voice and opinion and everyone else just starts agreeing automatically. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think sometimes we can go the opposite way too. Like, we don't want anyone's input because we're afraid that if we get any other opinions in, then they're going to make us wrong before we've even started. And sometimes that's true, but regardless, I think what you're really saying is look at the intention behind it. And the whole make mistakes out of integrity advice is really good. Like, are we looking for cover to avoid having to take responsibility for our decisions? And if we're making mistakes out of integrity, if we can be cool with that, then we're going to have so many more adventures, so many more opportunities, because we're willing to take risks that matter instead of coming from a place always of fear and never committing to something new or trying something new or doing something in our lives because we're afraid of getting criticized.
Yeah, and I think that there's an important element that I feel like is missing in the conversation, which is I'm not necessarily talking about trusting your knowledge base.
No, that's a good point.
I mean, I think that's part of it too. Like when we were talking about basically over-credentialing yourself, credentialing yourself?
Yeah.
It just sounds wrong now. We've said it so many times. Anyway.
So you over-credentialed, you're over-credentialed. You over-credentialed.
That's too funny. But yeah, so I mean, that we're talking about that piece. But I'm talking about the type of knowing that is intuition, that is your gut, that is coming from some other source, that everyone's opinion on that differs, but there is a source of knowledge that isn't just based on our external circumstances. And that's what that is. When you trust yourself to go take a big leap, oftentimes it's not because you know exactly the way the path is going to turn out, or because you have everything that you need to be successful. Big leaps in and of themselves are about trusting yourself, and that there's something in you that is calling you to a certain direction, a certain idea, a certain plan, and just being in the habit of rechecking, because you might start on this path and think, I'm going to create a podcast, for example. I don't know. That's the first thing that came to my head. I wonder why. And then you start on that path and realize that when you really look at it and you're really truthful with yourself, what's really needing to be created is a book or a YouTube show or something, right? But it's about not putting other people's opinions about what you need to be doing, about life, about what these expectations are, over your intuition and your gut, and in whatever way that you connect with that, right? There's nothing more important than trusting yourself in every moment and everything that you do. I obviously feel very passionate about this. I've just seen the way that I have shifted and blossomed and put myself out there in literally the last couple of weeks of my life, because I've been so adamant about that. So I'm a big advocate for it, okay?
Yeah, well, I think also you're the only one living your life. And I think that's why it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because so often we look for those external guidelines to help tell us where to go. And that can be helpful if we need some ideas. But ultimately, we have to make the decision. So I'm on board.
Cool. This has been a good conversation. Thanks for having it with me. And thanks to all of you amazing listeners for enjoying this ride today.
Yes, and thanks to Ryan for a magical conversation as well. And we hope you check out his groovy work. And we look forward to talking with you next week on the Motivational Millennial Podcast.
Bye.
For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!